Hey, okay, I'm going to do another tutorial with processing. So the first tutorial shows you sort of how to get the software, open the software, what you're looking at. Um, and I just made this size so I knew what part of the screen to capture when I was working. But so now that last tutorial just shows you how to make things and sort of randomly place them using the random functions and the ellipse or the rectangle function where you pass the random information to that. So let's start. We're going to make the classic bouncing object thing. We're going to make something move around the screen and bounce off the edges, and then we're going to talk about how to replace that with something else if you wanted to. So we need variables, and they're going to be decimal point variables, so they're going to be called float variables, and I'm going to make one for an x location and a y location. And then we're going to make a setup, just the function that lets you choose your paper size. This happens once. And I'm going to make a draw function. And in here, so I have x and y reserved variable space for an x and a y location. X across, y up and down. And we're just going to put something at that spot. So I'm going to use the ellipse function. And we're going to make it live at x comma y. We're going to make it of some size. So we're going to say 20 comma 20. And if we run this program, oops, we got one ellipse, and x and y, I never told them where to be, so they're starting out at 0, 0. So that ellipse is centered on 0, 0, and it's 20 by 20 width height. So this program is about an ellipse that's going to move, and the location is right there. So how could we move that? What if we did something like, so remember, draw is a loop. It's going to happen over and over and over. It's going to do what's in order, back to the top, in order, back to the top. So if we change x after, if I say x equals x plus 1 and y equals y plus 2, ellipse is going to be drawn at 0, 0 because that's what it was to start out. And then after it's drawn, it's going to move. It's going to change that number, so it's going to redraw it at that spot. So x gets bigger by 1, so 0 plus 1 is 1. Y is 0 plus 2 plus 4 plus 6 plus 8 plus etc. etc. So now if I run this program, we get an ellipse that's drawn over and over and over at that location as it changes. So we're iterating a variable, we're changing, we're adding to it, we're just moving it. So that equates to moving that variable. All right, so we've got some numbers here, 20, 20 for size. I'm going to make another variable for size and call it s. I'm going to say s equals 20. So that's once going to happen. So now we can say instead of 20, 20, s comma s. And so we want to be able to, well, now we need to sort of find the edges. So this is just going to go forever down into the ground, over this way, forever. We need the conditions that are going to change that position. So those are conditional statements, and the easiest one is an if, or the most commonly used is an if statement. So if x is greater than the width, so whatever the width is right there, 800. If x is greater than the width, we'll say x equals 0 again. So if this is true, do this. Do what's inside those curly brackets. So if I say if y is greater than the height, height's a built-in variable that equates to that, y equals 0. So if either of these become true, if y is greater than the height or if x is greater than the width, it's going to reset our variable. So let's just watch that happen. So y is going to happen first. It's going to get to the bottom, reset it, but the x was still not to the width yet. Still not to the width, so it's resetting the y to 0, and now, so this will just draw this, and it might. So when this became true, we reset the variable to its initial condition, which was 0. We want to have this sort of bounce. We want to change the speed of these things. So we can't really change the speed of them because right now that's a hard-coded number. X is getting bigger by 1 and y is getting greater by 2. So let's make some variables. So we don't want those numbers there. We want these to be variables that we can control and change and modify. So let's say float, we'll make one for x speed and one for y speed. And so now we're going to say x equals x plus x speed. Oops. And we're going to say x speed equals 1. So really, it's going to be the exact same program. And we're going to say y speed equals 2. And we're going to say y equals y plus y speed. So now if we run this, we'll get the exact same. But now we're going to change our condition. So I don't want this to just go off the screen in this like circular universe way. I want them to bounce off the edge. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say if the x, well, let's just worry about the y. If y is greater than the height, y equals 0. We don't want to say y equals 0. We want to change the y speed. So y speed is getting bigger by 1. What if this got bigger by negative 1? Would that do what we wanted it to? So let's say instead of resetting y, we're going to change y speed. Y speed is what's controlling where it lives. So we're going to say y speed equals y speed times negative 1. So whatever y speed is, it's now going to be negative. So this is going to be negative 2. Y equals y plus negative 2, which is going to make it go up. It's going to subtract. And so we can do that. And then we also, this is going to theoretically bounce off all 4 walls. So we need conditions for all 4 of those states. So let's change this to x speed equals x speed times negative 1. And then we're going to say, so now let's just run this just to see. So here it goes. So y speed, well, if y is greater than height, it bounced. It turned to negative, 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 negative. And now it's going off the screen. So we need to set the 2 conditions for this. So the height is 1 boundary. And if y becomes less than 0, so or y becomes less than 0. So if x is greater than the height or x becomes less than 0, flip for me. And let's make these a little bigger. So we'll say 3 and 5 for the speed. It's going to make them negative, positive, and negative, and positive, just so this happens faster. So there goes our bounce. So we're thinking about this as like the classic sort of screensaver thing of something sort of bouncing around the screen. So we have this location, and I could do whatever I want there. I could say rectangle at x comma y that is random 20 by random 20, and we'll hide this ellipse code. So now we're getting that location is still doing its thing. It's changing and bouncing, but we're doing something different at that location. We're drawing a rectangle that's a random size instead of a ball. So what we can do is learn how to put images in here instead of this being just primitive shapes. And then there's one more thing we can do is we can reset our background. Every draw, we're going to reset our background to white. So now we're just going to, it's going to look like we have a little rectangle that's just flapping its wings around the screen. So we have the location, we have its conditions to change it. If it's greater than the width or less than the top, less than the left, make that speed, which is being used right here, x is getting bigger by a speed, make it negative. So I'm going to end this one here so it doesn't get too big, and then we'll talk about putting images in.